Welcome to Flight Sim Alaska. I'm Dave, the armchair bush pilot. For today's virtual flight seeing tour of Alaska, we're going to follow the mighty Susitna River from its mouth in Upper Cook Inlet to the world-famous community of Talkeetna at the confluence of the Talkeetna, Susitna, and Chulitna rivers. So, strap in, get comfortable, take a second to make sure you've hit that like button, and let's get this aircraft into the air. So the first order of business is actually getting this thing started, and I don't always get it right. This is the Cessna Grand Caravan. It's a common sight flying out of Merrill Field here, and that's where we're at, Merrill Field Airport, just east of downtown Anchorage in Alaska's largest city. And this is a very busy airport indeed. Let's see if we can get this set up here. I always feel like I goof this off. Turn that up. That on. Oops, avionics got to be on.
Test. Okay.
So far, so good. Okay, second avionics. Turn some more lights on here. All right, cool beans. Turn that to low idle. Turn that to normal. Turn that off. All right, I think we are good to go. Turn that up a little bit. All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and ask for permission to leave, shall we?
Merrill Ground ACBP 444 with Alpha request taxi to the active departing straight out.
ACBP 444 taxi to and hold short of runway 25 using taxiway Foxtrot. Contact tower on 127.5 when ready.
Taxiing hold short runway 25 via taxiway Foxtrot ACBP 444.
All right, cool. So I think that's good enough for now. We can go ahead and get underway. So again, Merrill Field is one of the busiest general aviation airports. I think it's the busiest in Alaska for sure. People around here like to say that it's one of the busiest in the world, with takeoffs and landings rivaling that of LAX. That's kind of baloney. I believed it for a long time, and then I actually looked it up, and it is a busy airport. There are about 840 aircraft stationed or based out of this airport, but it only has about 126,000 operations per year. By contrast, LAX has just shy of 700,000. So for a while, Merrill Field was Anchorage's main airport. It opened officially in 1930 and continued operating as Anchorage's main airport until Ted Stevens Anchorage International opened in 1951. And this isn't even Anchorage's first airport. We'll fly by and check that out, but that's where the current site of the Delaney Park Strip is today in downtown Anchorage. And that was back when Anchorage was...
ACBP 444 hold position caution, other traffic. ACBP 444 continue taxi.
That was when Anchorage was little more than...
Roger ACBP 444.
than a tent city, really. Of course, that's bootlegger time when we were building the Alaska Railroad and so on. So some interesting things about this particular airport. Looking off to our right here, these buildings do exist in real life. They, of course, look much nicer in real life. Those belong to the University of Alaska Anchorage. Flight Technical Service, Aviation Technical Services, I believe. Didn't actually write that down in my notes, so I don't quite remember. But what's interesting about that is that they were donated a Boeing 727 Trijet in 2013. It was the largest aircraft to have ever landed at Merrill Field, and it's still there to this day. Not just because the runway isn't really long enough to get it off the ground, but because it's no longer airworthy. And that aircraft actually sits right here. And when you drive from the north, or to the north on that Glen Highway, which comes out just right here, honestly, on the other side of this tarmac, you'll see that, and it's a great notable feature. And I just wanted to point that out because it's notably missing, and it'd be cool to have something modeled in to look like that. But I don't feel like modding this particular airport, so we're just gonna let that be. All right, let's ask for permission to get out of here, shall we?
Merrill Tower ACBP 444 ready at runway 25 departing straight out.
ACBP 444 cleared for takeoff runway 25 straight out, departure approved.
Cleared for takeoff runway 25 ACBP 444.
All right, cool. I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and see if we can make this happen, shall we? Now, I do have sometimes a bit of trouble getting the Cessna Grand Caravan off of this runway. In part, I think it's just, I don't really know what I'm doing, and so it doesn't help. But this is a common aircraft you do see coming off out of this runway in particular in Merrill Field, and I think they're used for local commuter service to places like Tyonek and perhaps Kenai. I'm not 100% sure. So this is definitely an aircraft that you would see coming out of this airport, but it does seem to want the entire runway to come off in the simulator. It does have a tendency to be a little slow to accelerate, and is one of the things, it's a bit of a drag about this aircraft in the sim, but again, it's a common turboprop aircraft around Alaska anyways. All right, I think we're ready to rotate here. Cool, slow things down, maybe a little bit less trim, and you do often see these things kind of take off at a pretty low angle of what do they call that? What are we, ascent, I guess? So we're heading towards downtown Anchorage. Off to our right is the Alaska Railroad. See down there, it's an area called Ship Creek. There's a railroad terminal down here, and this here is downtown Anchorage. We don't have too much for high rises. There's the Hilton Hotel, that's what's meant to be represented there. And this is meant to be two different buildings, the Atwood building for state offices, and then the ConocoPhillips building, which is of course oil. And then over here, one of these buildings is meant to be the Captain Cook Hotel. Other than that, like, these roads look pretty good. Now this here was that Delaney Park strip I was talking about, Anchorage's first airstrip. I don't know how long or when that was in operation, but it's definitely a park now. Here's the Westchester Lagoon. Over here is Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, and this water is Lake Hood, which is a floatplane base, and a very active one at that. It's not in the sim exactly as a floatplane base, but we can still land there thanks to getting to land anywhere you'd like. Now, I do have live traffic turned on for this particular exercise, which isn't a big deal because we're unlikely to see anything once we get moving, but this area is a very, very active air corridor. Ted Stevens is reportedly the fourth largest cargo airport in the world, and you constantly see 747s taking off out of here from moving from the Far East into the West, or vice versa. And so pretty much anybody that operates those Far East routes, Atlas, Polar, I mean, pretty much you name it, you see them coming out of here. I even see occasionally that especially modified 747 that's used to move Dreamliner parts, that does come through Anchorage International Airport. Of interest also is you get FedEx and UPS, both have bases here. So one of these, I think that's the FedEx, and UPS's, I forget where. But they run those great big tri-jets. I think they're MD-11s, and they do have a few DC-10s. And in spite of being an airplane enthusiast, I really can't tell the difference when I see them, but I suspect they're mostly those MD-11s, which are big tri-jets. So in the summertime, you also see 737s flying through here. It's a fairly busy passenger airport as well. Doesn't rival anything like I don't know, Seattle, but you know, it's busy enough. And then of course you also see.
444, you are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
Merrill Tower ACBP 444 frequency change.
You all see Dash 8s coming in here too. It's a common passenger aircraft to places around here. Let's see here if I can do this right. Heading mode, let's turn heading on. All right, cool. Now we can go ahead and autopilot this a little bit. Now we're just passing over an area called Point Mackenzie or Point Mac. There's a port out here, but it's pretty rural. It's 2 hours drive from downtown Anchorage, actually, by Connect Goose Bay Road. I haven't been down here in years, but this is, I think by anybody who doesn't live in Alaska standards, we call this rural. I'd call it sort of suburban with notes of rural, and that's kind of where I live too. Sort of feels the same. This farmland out here really is farmland. We don't grow wheat or corn or anything like that. It's, you know, going to be mostly potatoes, carrots, cabbage, broccoli, that kind of stuff, greens, you know, kale, collard greens, that kind of junk. So that's what we get out here, and these lakes are absolutely full of trout. I did once I want to say it was actually this lake, but I don't know. I once stayed at a cabin at one of these lakes and had a great time fishing for trout and just kind of feeling like I was out in the middle of nowhere except for the frequent air traffic. So we are headed to the west. In front of us is Mount Susitna. Right here is the Little Susitna River. And then out there further is the Susitna River, and that's where we're headed. And we're going to go north once we start heading, or once we get on top of that. So thinking about this Little Susitna River, this is really a different drainage than the Susitna River. It comes out of, I believe, Mint Glacier up in the Hatcher Pass area. And I did do a video about Hatcher Pass. I didn't go all the way up to where the Little Sioux, which is to say the Little Susitna River starts. I haven't actually checked that out in the simulator yet, but I probably will at some point. And then you've got the Susitna River again, is just a totally different drainage. And the Little Sioux is really the most significant drainage in between the Susitna River and the Matanuska River, well off to our east there. Although there are a few other sort of main creeks that flow into the Knik arm of Upper Cook Inlet. Of course, this being Upper Cook Inlet here, Fire Island over here, and then the Kenai Peninsula right there. Merrill Pass is over here, Mount Spur, and Merrill Pass, of course, you fly through there, and you will head out towards the Upper Kuskokwim region in western Alaska, and that will take you out to the Bering Sea. So this Little Susitna River, there's no good Dena'ina translation that I was able to find. The linguists that could be dependent on for that were not able to drum one up. But the name is there in case you're interested. And let's see, what else can we say about this stuff? All 5 species of salmon come up in here. It's a very popular fishing destination. I haven't been out there in a very long time. Now, let's take a look at Mount Susitna here. So Mount Susitna, the name of that I just popped up there, translates to little mountain. It's meant to sort of like parallel the big one, which is Denali. Up here is a smaller sort of standalone mountain. Now, this is a really important mountain for local Dena'ina Athabascan people. Now, in previous videos I mentioned, I'm sure more than one video, whenever we fly by this I mention it, this mountain sometimes called Sleeping Lady. And there's a story that comes from the 1970s and was attributed to local Athabascan traditions, which is not accurate. But it was rewritten in the 1990s by Ann Dixon. And basically what it amounts to is a woman went to sleep when her hunter husband went off to hunt, and she never woke up as he never came back, and this is meant to be her head and her hair, and you can kind of see the deal. Now, the real story of this place, as told by the traditional, the traditional Dena'ina story, is that this ridge here translates literally to the ridge where we cry, the place where we cry. This is a place of mourning. Dena'ina people would be able to come up here and they could see their entire country out all around them, all sides of the Dena'ina territory, and they would remember their family and people they lost. And so this is where they would come and they would cry, is here. And I find that to be just as powerful as anything else, and in some ways much, much more so, because it's people connecting to their traditions and their land and their history, more than a saccharine story about love. And because it goes beyond all that. So anyway, I kind of wanted to share that. I thought it was pretty interesting. So as we head towards this here, there's this other little feature here that's really hard to tell. I think it's this right here. And I'm going to slaughter this, but I'm going to try to say it. And it's Dinglishna Hill. And I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. But what's interesting about this place is it's another story that turned up in Shepeats, Alaska. I think it was Billy Pete that relayed the story. But this place is interesting because it's sort of like what he described as people would go out there and they kind of get lost and they go around circles, and then after half a day would just somehow manage to come home. And there's this other thing associated with this place that's basically translates to big bracket fungus sticking out from little ridge. And the type of fungus they're talking about is punk, which is a sort of a shelf type of fungus that grows off of birch trees, and local folks around here, in fact all around the state, will take that, they'll grind it up and they'll mix it with their tobacco, gives it a little bit more kick. And he's sort of described this thing as being 50 feet around and taking millions of years to grow, and people would circle around and chop up chop it all up with axes, and it was as big as the inside of a house. Anyway, that's kind of the story. I'm paraphrasing it quite a bit. So anyway, that's I thought that was an interesting story there. And then over here, I'm pretty sure this water, it's hard to tell. I'm pretty sure that's Alexander Creek, which translates to, I'll just pop it up there. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but it means Clearwater River. And that's just south of a place called the Susitna Station, which is up over here. So we're going to go this direction, and this here's the Yentna River. We're going to fly past Yentna, or Yentnu in the local Athabascan, Yentnu meaning backbone river. And Susitna Station is no longer occupied. It's, you get maybe 2 or 3 people that live there year round, and it used to be pretty hoppin' place back in the day, let's say 100 years ago. And the people in this area were really decimated by a smallpox epidemic some hundreds of years, I guess, decades ago. I didn't really have a date for that, and I wasn't able to dig it up. I had sort of thought it was the flu that came up here, the 1918 flu, but it turns out it was the smallpox that really ravaged these areas, and that's super sad. But with Susitna Station, the name for that, I'll pop that up. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It means beneath big rock. I am not 100% sure what that refers to. I don't know if it's distinguished in the hill, or this sounds Susitna, or if there's some other feature near where that's at. And I am not 100% sure where Susitna Station is. It's like right in this area, but again, there's nothing to really point at in the sim because there's nobody really there anymore. Now, to go back a little bit, one of the things that this area is known for in a big way is mining, and there's no real major active mining in the area right now, but there are some mining districts. But this is very resource rich. This it's not a ridge. This right here, this ravine, was well known by Shempete, well, Shempete described as a well-known area to collect copper. And he had several stories. Him and Billy both had great stories that turn up in Shempete's Alaska that talk about collecting copper in here and how people would get rich. And this was all before Russian contact even. So we're talking about oral traditions that are more than 500 years old, talking about the copper in this area. And there's gold out here too, all over the doggone place. But there's nothing major out here these days for mining. There's the Upper Yentna mining district, and then there's also the Petersfield mining, and that's kind of where we're headed now, is in that general direction. That's near where Talkeetna is at. And thinking about that, well, let me come back to the mining, because we're gonna keep flying up here. I want to mention something about this Yentna River before we start really turning and following this Susitna River here. So this Yentna River, again, this Susitna River has all the salmon, and you can get salmon all the way up the Yentna as well. And these are at one time were very rich waters. And it's not just all 5 species of salmon, but you get Dolly Varden and burbot, and all the stuff that comes up rivers is in here. And way up here, state residents can legally put in a fish wheel to catch salmon. And if you don't know what a fish wheel is, it's this big wooden contraption. It kind of sits on floats in the water, and this big wheel sort of spins with buckets on the end, and it'll pick salmon out of the river and drop them into a basket. And that's a very efficient way to get salmon. It's used, that method is used in this area. It's used, I think, really widely in Athabascan areas, culturally Athabascan areas. So this area, the Copper Basin, which is that direction, we'll visit the Copper Basin at some point, and then also in the Upper Kuskokwim it's used, and also Yukon as well. So that's pretty interesting, and that's still an active thing that folks do to this day. Not a lot of people come out here. This is not accessible, really. This whole area here is, people will get out here by snowmobile, which is to say snow machine. That's what we call it in this area. So if you ever hear an Alaskan talk about a snow machine, we're talking about snowmobiles, just FYI there. Or you can get out here by boat or airplane, and so people will come out down the Susitna, and they'll go up the Yentna by boat, and that's what they do. And I don't actually know how far folks go up here, but that Yentna, and I think that mining district, to come back to the mining, is pretty far up here, and I think there's a few active commercial claims, but nothing big. We're not talking about big open pit mines or anything like that. We're talking about small operators. And the same is true for the Petersfield mining area. In fact, I don't think there's any commercial operators out there, but you can go gold panning recreationally and that sort of thing. So, and it's interesting because DNR is sort of mandated with making sure that these areas are developed, but my guess is that the density of minerals isn't such that it's economic. And gold mining is just such a core part of mining in general, such a core part of this region of the state. I mean, these Talkeetna Mountains up here is Hatcher Pass Gold Mine. In its day, 100 years ago, Independence Gold Mine up there was one of the largest gold mines and most productive gold mines in the world. And it was a hard rock mine underneath the mountains. And I did do a video on that. You can check that out if you like. Some of the buildings actually show up in the sim. It's pretty neat. So looking at this region here, some things I got to say about it. We are flying over the Matanuska-Susitna borough. Alaska does not have counties. We have municipalities and boroughs. The Matanuska-Susitna borough is about the size of West Virginia, with a population of, I think, just over 100,000 people. The bulk of that population lives in this area. This is the core: Mat-Su, Wasilla, Palmer, Houston, and Big Lake. I'm not sure if that's Big Lake. I kind of get lost with all these lakes here. And that's where the bulk of the population lives, including myself. I live over here, and I think I recognize this. I see it as a suburban place because it's everything's very accessible, and rural in this state means something very different than it does to a lot of other people. I think a lot of people outside of the state of Alaska would see the Mat-Su borough, particularly where I live, as more rural than suburban. And again, I consider it suburban with hints of ruralness. I think something I already said before. And so anyway, that's kind of that. So thinking about the Susitna River here, the Alaska, the Dena'ina name for that is Susitnu or Soyitnu, which means sandy river. It's about 313 miles long, and it originates at the Susitna Glacier in the Alaska Range up here on Mount Hayes. By volume, it's the 15th largest river in the United States. Back when Russian traders were active in the area, and we're talking a couple of hundred years ago at this point, the local Dena'ina folks had the strength in numbers that they could prevent those traders from getting too far up the Susitna River, get too much of a foothold, which again I find remarkable, as these days the Dena'ina folks are not particularly numerous, and the sort of the biggest place is Chulitna village off near Anchorage there. So unlike further south in Cook Inlet, the Russian names that you see are less obvious. Not that there aren't Russian names for lots of places up here, it's just that it's not as obvious in a lot of cases, I think, and we tend to have more English names or Dena'ina, anglicized Dena'ina kinds of names for that sort of thing. So let's see, what else can we say about this area? There's just so daggone much. So thinking about the Petersville Mining District, which we're coming up on here, and honestly I'm not 100% sure what area it covers, but I mean, this is kind of a big flat zip code, so it's hard to find features here. But that Petersville Mining District, again, like so much of Alaska, mining is a huge thing in this region, always has been. And in 1905, gold was discovered in the area and drew prospectors, and most of the mining activity was west of the current site of Talkeetna. Talkeetna didn't exist at the time, and so it wasn't until that happened that Talkeetna didn't even really get created until the Alaska Railroad was being put in. And Alaska Railroad starts in Seward, Alaska, and the terminal is in Fairbanks, way to our north here. And in 1915, Talkeetna, which is where we're headed, was selected as the engineering headquarters. And of course, its proximity to all the mining and stuff, it was sort of like a really good fit. So you can see here on our map, I'm just kind of zooming out, make sure we're on track here. But the town itself was established the year after that designation, and several businesses are still in operation that started that year as well. One important one, or it is important for the area, is Nagley's store. It still exists today. You can still go there. You can get a scoop of ice cream. I think until fairly recently, the mayor of Talkeetna, which is the cat, and fairly recently, being a couple of years at this point, I think, would hang out there, and you could even visit the cat. Now, what's remarkable about that is the fact that in this state, particularly in this region, that kind of thing, 100-year-old business, is so incredibly rare. I can't actually think of another example, and all the examples I can think of are legitimately all in Talkeetna. I think there's more than just Nagley's store. Anchorage 100 years ago in 1915 was a little bit more than a muddy tent city, and it was established for the same reason that Talkeetna was, is that was the building of the Alaska Railroad. Most of the population base in this region was in fact over here in the Palmer area, which was settled by prospectors and things. And of course this area really boomed later on when we had New Deal settlement programs, so that would be presumably in the 30s and the 40s. I should probably know the answer to that. This is my hometown, but I can't remember everything, I think. Pardon me while I take a look at my notes and try to remember everything I want to talk about here. This area is very rich in history, and I could just talk about it all day long. So maybe let's just talk about the scenery here. Over here the scenery is not great, but for whatever reason there's a track along here that just looks really good. These rivers here and the little muskegee kinds of marshy areas and the trees, this looks really authentic. Now all these trees here are going to be a mix of birch, cottonwood, and then spruce, and this all makes it look like it's spruce, and you do see pretty pure spruce stands in here, but not exclusively. Now I did talk about the Petersville mining district and how it's being managed by DNR to try to develop some mines out here, and that's not really materialized in anything profound, commercial or large or whatever. But what this area is known for is recreation. It's known for hunting, it's known for fishing, it's known for camping, it's known for snow machining or snowmobiling, and people come out here. There's a ton of recreational cabins. People come boating out here, and so that's what really this is known for. People frequently say, "Oh, I'm going out to Petersville for fill in the blank." I think I know somebody who's getting married out in the Petersville district next year, actually, because it's such a beautiful destination, and if the weather is nice, in fact, is kind of directly underneath, within the line of sight of Denali there, and Mount Foraker right there. So it's very pretty, and it's also really accessible. It's super remote. I mean, look at this. There's nothing out here. There's definitely cabins and things strewn all about this region, but I couldn't tell you where, and I can tell you this is as remote as you can really get off the road system in this part of the state. As you drive north, it gets the calculus changes a little bit, but this is pretty off the grid, honestly. And you're not maybe 2 hours from Anchorage at this point. So yeah, I mean that's pretty cool stuff is what it is, I think. So now we are coming up to where we want to be ultimately. And this again is Susitna River. We're following it. Oh, it's off to our right here, and the Parks Highway, the George Parks Highway, which is what we call it. If you look on a map, there's a number associated with it. I don't even know what the number is. It's just the Parks Highway to me. Goes from just east of Wasilla up to Fairbanks, which is about a 5-hour drive, give or take. And that stays largely on this side, and then follows up and then crosses just before Talkeetna. What's interesting is that Talkeetna is pretty far off the main Glen Highway. You actually have to take the Parks Highway, main Parks Highway. You have to take a cutoff road that leads you out, and that cutoff road is maybe 15 or 20 miles long. So Talkeetna is directly on the Alaska Railroad, which you can still get a ride on the Alaska Railroad out to the city of Talkeetna, the community of Talkeetna. And back when it was built, it took like, I don't know, 15 hours or something like that to get out there. These days we're talking like 3 hours or something like that. So the Alaska Railroad stays on this side until Talkeetna, and then it crosses, and the Parks Highway, that is on this side, and then it crosses a little bit sooner. And I don't know if we'll see that. I can't really remember if the bridge actually renders in, but it's significantly before Talkeetna in any case. And Talkeetna is such a lovely tourist destination. It's like I said, it's within a couple hours of drive of Anchorage, maybe 3 at the most. I'm sort of having a hard time remembering. I feel like it's an hour and a half from where I'm at. We're about 45 minutes from Anchorage, downtown Anchorage. So it's something that you can do in a day. You can get up early, drive out there, do the tourist stuff, have a meal, hang out, whatever, and then drive back and be in Anchorage before it's too much later. So that makes it such a desirable place to be, or to come hang out, come check out. And of course, the other interesting things about Talkeetna is that it is sort of home base for any of the operations that occur on Denali. So if you want to do a flight scene tour, you're going to leave out of Talkeetna. And it might be that you start in Anchorage on, let's say, even one of these kind of deals, and then you fly out to Talkeetna, but then you'll bounce from there to here, and more likely you'll actually drive out here, find one of those flight scene operators right on the main strip of touristy stuff, and then they'll take you up to go do this. There's also cool horseback riding stuff you can do out there. There's a lot of, it's a very scenic area. And then any climbing operations that occur up here, they will fly out of here, take you up to base camp, wherever the heck that's at, I don't even know, and then you would climb up there. So that's some of what's going on there. Now we are kind of looking at it now. This here would be the Talkeetna River. You can kind of see it just there. And this here is the Susitna River going straight out. And this here would be the Chulitna River. And the Chulitna River, I'm not going to try to pronounce that because I think I'll get it wrong, but it means current flows out lake. That's the local Denali name for it. And the Talkeetna River is, I'm not going to pronounce that, I'll pop it up again, but what that means is a literal translation is food is stored in river. A less literal interpretation is going to be something more like river of plenty. I think that is likely to refer to the once very, very abundant stocks of Chinook or king salmon or in the area, as well as red salmon or sockeye salmon in the area. These days the runs are much, much smaller, but they're still generally present, that is. There's only about 400 people live in Talkeetna. It is not a big place. It's, you know, super cute. I think the seasonal occupation is like probably double that 400 figure, maybe even close to triple. So just interesting demographics there. This, I believe, is that park's highway, and this is where it crosses over, which means we probably need to think about descending and checking our altitude a little bit, maybe even asking to land here. Let's have, I'm just looking at our map, and we should be headed more or less straight in. We're going to land on runway 34, so we're pretty close, and these runways aren't totally lined up to what they should be because of I've got a mod and it didn't quite line up the runway just the way it ought to be. So we may have to goof around with it a little bit. So let's start by reducing our altitude maybe by, I don't know, just a little bit. All right, using the autopilot so I don't crash this, yeah? Cool. I feel like our runway is like right here, but I always feel like I goof it up. Trying to pay attention here. All these sandbars are really authentic. This actually turned out pretty well. And again, this landscape looks real good too. I like this a lot. This just looks really phenomenal to me. And you could in fact land a little cub on these sandbars, and not only in real life but in the sim too. And I probably should do that just for fun one of these days. I think that'd be pretty neat. I'm gonna come over here a little bit so we make sure we're lined up just right, because I am 90% sure this is our runway, and that's where we want to be pretty darn soon. Look at this. And when you're here on a good clear day, you can see Denali and Foraker. I don't think I've ever been here on a day clear enough where you can see that. It's usually fairly cloudy in this region, a lot of overcast days, but on a nice day, you can really see the Alaska Range really pops. And when you do visit this place, you can drive down to the end of the road, just past the strip of all the cool touristy stuff, and that's pretty neat. And you can kind of see where the Talkeetna River flows in to the which the Talkeetna River's here, flows into the Susitna River, and Chulitna River's up a little bit further. You can't really see that from town. I sort of thought you could, you know, sort of thinking back. To going in, you can kind of see where the waters mix and stuff. You can't quite see where they all come together. You have to walk a little bit, but you can. You absolutely can. You can follow the railroad and get up over there. Let's go ahead and dial up ATC and just let them know we're going to come in here. Let's find it here. Talkeetna, we don't want that one, we want this one. And tune traffic, and let's select runway. We want runway 36. And although I think it's really 34, you know, I could be wrong. I thought it was 34. And then we'll announce a full stop landing. Pardon me. Go ahead and just start descending quite a bit here. I probably need to trim things out. Oof. I gotta say, the trim in this game is so, or in this simulator, is so darn sensitive. It makes it really, really difficult to fly. I think we're way higher than I'd like to be. We can make it work, though. We can make it work. Yeah, so I find that the representation in this sim, and I am using a modded version of the sim, and what I don't know is whether or not the mod includes some enhancements to the terrain. I have an idea it does, because this looks really nice. So if you have a different experience, and also I'm recording this and probably will release it immediately after the North America update, and as I understand, North America update is going to involve some updates for Denali National Park, and I have a sneaking suspicion that Talkeetna could figure into that update. Now that's all speculation, of course. I don't know what the heck they're going to do and how good it's going to look, but it's possible that this could change even then. And so off to the left of that landing strip there, that will be our little city of Talkeetna. And I can't really remember the highway. I don't remember the highway coming south of that. I feel like the highway comes in north of the runway and sort of swings down into town like that. But you know what? I could be wrong about that. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think that the highway comes down here, swings past, and then turns here. And this is the little area where you would see all three rivers come together. You could almost see that one. The problem is that, yeah, it's so flat here, you can't see that far, and there's all these sandbars. So, anyway, I'm pretty sure that's where you would go and park your car and walk around. And there's all these little vendors and stuff that sell handmade trinkets and artwork and cool stuff like that. I can't say enough how cool of a day trip it is. So if you find yourself in Alaska on tour, on holiday, you know, definitely make a day to do Talkeetna. It's 100% worth it. There's a brewery out here, makes good beer. They make good whiskey. They make good gin is really good, actually. They do a good gin. The recipe that I got from them basically involves muddled fresh basil leaves for a gin and tonic. Basically, the rest of it is normal gin and tonic stuff. So, anyways, all right. I'm trying to concentrate at the same time as talk and not stall and not crash. So I'm pretty sure this little thing off to our left here is another airstrip. I'm pretty sure that's that Talkeetna Village airstrip. Oof. I need to focus. And then directly below us, I'm pretty sure, is that highway and the Alaska Railroad, both, as they cut through Talkeetna. It's not the George Parks Highway. It'd be the Talkeetna cutoff, I think is what we call it. I'm not sure if it's got a better name than that, but that's how you'd locate it in any case. This is going to be a trick. I've got damage turned on, so let's see if we crash this or if we can set it down soft enough to taxi to parking. Oof. Yeah, we're way high right now. All right. I think we can do this. Oof. All right. I think we can call that good enough. Not super awesome by any stretch. Oh, actually, we had quite a bit of runway, didn't we? Cool. Well, that was our tour from Merrill Field in Anchorage to Talkeetna along the mighty Susitna River. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with me and learning a little bit about Alaska and a little bit about this region. If you like the content, leave me a like. Hit subscribe if you want to see more. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much.